year. So hence the low numbers in the church, but it's life. It's going to keep coming around over and over again. It'll go away. It'll come back. A couple things that just come to mind that we need to be praying about. The Leader Convention coming up here in April at Easter time. Those folks have been working on that for, a better part of a year. We owe them prayers as a congregation to help bless them and help ask God to help make that a successful endeavor for all the kids and the leaders of the program too. Just keep them in mind. Grief Share, we still have that going on. We didn't have it Wednesday night because a lot of people that were in the group were not going to make it or sick. So we canceled that just like we canceled the rest of the Wednesday night activities, but we'll start that back up Wednesday. Big group, things are going well, so keep that in your prayers. Obviously, everybody that's out with COVID. I think Dolores had a counter on the church chat. I think she said 13. I don't know if that's the real number or not. I don't know. I haven't heard of anybody getting extremely sick, like hospital sick yet. So that's a good thing for us. It's a far different story than we had a year ago. So that's good. Laura, she's doing better from her knee surgery. Sounds like she's already back to work. That's good. I know Glenda's got a surgery coming up. I don't know what the date is of it, but I know she's...
Looks like it's going to be about a month.
Yeah. What else?
The Panama team are down in Panama. So,
yep.
we need to be praying for them. Because they're sending a lot of people. And hopefully they can do some big things down there.
Yeah. Panama cruise out. Vicki, you got any dinner yet from anybody in the church? Remember last week? Not yet. It's an inside joke between me and Vicki, so if y'all don't get it. All right. Anything else that comes to mind? All right, let's pray. Father, thank you for this day, and thank you for letting us meet together today and study about you and talk about good things that are going on for your kingdom here in Long Beach and in Panama. Father, help us to open our minds and our hearts to you. Help us to always look to Scripture to study your ways and live our lives according to what you've written down for us. Father, we thank you so much for Jesus. We know it's through him that all of us have hope and that all of us will be together in heaven someday. Father, a lot of people are out sick. Watch out for them. Take care of them. Bring them back to us. Father, we do ask that this COVID wave leaves so we can have all of our family back here sooner rather than later. If that's what you want for us, bring them back to us. Father, so once again, thank you for Jesus. It's in his name we pray. Amen. All right, so angel study is over. Moving on. I think that was a good study for us, but it ran its course and ready to move on to other things. So for the next little while, we're going to talk about parables. Some of the parables, specifically Jesus throughout. Today we're not going to get a lot into Jesus' parables. We're going to talk about parables in general. Talk about what they are. We're going to look at an Old Testament example of one, because there are examples in the Old Testament, and then we'll go through some basic tips about how you should study parables. Just little things to keep in mind as we're going through them. All right, let's throw out what the word means right off the bat. So the word parables, something that's symbolic, narrative form. It takes common life and applies like something in common life to a biblical principle. Normally, comparison, figure of speech, proverb, a placing of one thing beside of another, comparing two things, and you'll see that when we start looking at Jesus's parables, that's exactly what he does. He takes common things that are known to mankind that were living at the time, and he uses those things to teach a biblical principle. It's a simple thought, About 1/3 of Jesus' teachings were in parable form. So it's an important part of his teaching that we need to study, because he used it very often, especially in the literature that we have written down about his teaching. A throwing alongside of. Some people call it an earthly account of a heavenly truth. There's all sorts of little cool things you can put with thought. We see them. We see them in our everyday life. People still use parables and they still compare things and try to come up with cool thoughts. Here's an example of just a short thought that would compare something and trigger you to think deeper about this, right? And this is obviously not a biblical quote. This is Italian of origin. I don't think the author's even known. It's been mentioned a few times. At the end of the game, the king and the pawn go back into the same box, right? Obviously, it's talking about chess, right? But it triggers you to think about humility, right? And the fact that I shouldn't be considering myself more valuable than anybody else, right? Keep my mind in the right place, because at the end of the day, it don't really matter.
At the end of life, you're going back in the car.
Yeah, that's the thought behind why this was written, right? Because at the end of the day, everybody's going to go into the same dirt, right? So that's it. Jesus does things like this in Scripture. You can see that if ordinary people, can come up with things like that, and it's easy to get people to prick at people's hearts a little bit by comparing heavenly things with earthly things. Parables use common things known to man to illustrate deeper meaning. They also give little pieces of truth. Throw it out there. You remember going back to school. You remember back when you was in school or college. A lot of times you would have a teacher probably that would intentionally throw out little nuggets of information and say something like, "I hope you were paying attention," because you're going to see that again. Well, I remember I wasn't always paying attention, right? And then I would hear the magic phrase, and I'd be like, "Oh, I wish I was listening, or I wish I was paying attention to that." You got some of that stuff going on with parables. I do it all the time at work. I throw out my airmen little pieces of information, like, something in reference to an inspection coming, or we're going to breathalyze everybody. I won't tell them that specifically, but they don't drink this weekend, or something like that. And some people will hear it and listen, and other people will not hear it. They'll disregard it, and they won't be prepared for when the situation occurs. Obviously, Jesus, he knows fully well what's coming in the future, and he tries to throw these little nuggets of truth and information out to folks. And some get it, some take it to heart, some pray about it, meditate on it, and try to learn the truth behind what Jesus is saying. Some just completely harden their hearts and don't pay attention to what he's saying. So here's we're going to stay in Luke for the majority of this study. There's a lot of parables in Luke. I think there's more parables than any of the other gospel books. Matthew, Mark, Luke all contain parables. John contains none. So that's kind of how they're split out. And there are some that are just Luke or just Matthew that were recorded. And we'll try to point those out when we get there. We're not gonna go over every single parable. There's a lot of them, but what I want to do is get us in the mindset of looking at them, identifying what issue Jesus was trying to work through, what he was trying to teach, and then I want us to get in the habit of taking that text and praying about it and thinking about it, and seeing if we can get some deeper meaning for ourselves behind what Jesus is trying to teach. We'll stay on it. I mean, I've been staying with studies for 2.5, 3 months. That's probably what we'll do here. We'll probably go through 12 or 15 parables during that time, and then we'll move on. But we're not going to get every one of them. We're not going to do the study for years. But we'll get to some good thoughts in here. Today, I want to look at an Old Testament parable first to kind of get our get us in a mindset of like reading a parable and what it is and thinking about it. One of the most famous ones, and it's good practice to think about when it comes. A lot of folks tie parables specifically to Jesus, but they're not an invention of his. They were around before Jesus, and they're still around now. Jesus just brilliantly used them to help teach truths. They were very common in Middle Eastern cultures, and obviously included in the Old Testament. So we're going to go to 2 Samuel 11. What we're going to do is we're going to do quite a bit of reading and get some context before we look at a parable. And this was about David. It's a well-known story, well-known account. And we're just going to do a little reading. And then, at the end of the situation, there's a parable that we can look at and think about. So 2 Samuel 11, so start in verse 1. In the spring of the year, the time when kings go out to battle, David sent Joab and his servants with him and all of Israel. And they ravaged the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained in Jerusalem. It happened late one afternoon when David arose from his couch and was walking on the roof of the king's house that he saw from the roof a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful. And David sent and inquired about the woman. And one said, "Is not this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite?" So David sent messengers and took her, and she came to him, and he lay with her. Now she had been purifying herself from her uncleanness. Then she returned to her house, and the woman conceived and told David, "I'm pregnant." Right? David messed up. That's what's going on here. Let's keep reading. Because he didn't just mess up, it gets worse. David sent the word to Joab, "Send me Uriah the Hittite." And Joab sent Uriah to David. When Uriah came to him, David asked how Joab was doing, and how the people were doing, and how the war was going. Then David said to Uriah, "Go down to the house and wash your feet." And Uriah went out of the king's house, and there followed him a present from the king. But Uriah slept at the door of the king's house with all the servants of his lord, and did not go down to his house. When they told David Uriah did not go down to his house, David said to Uriah, "Have you not come from a journey? Why did you not go down to your house?" Uriah said to David, "The ark and Israel and Judah dwell in the booths, and my lord Joab and the servants of my lord camping in the open field. Shall I then go to my house to eat and drink and lie with my wife? As you live and as your soul lives, I will not do this thing." Then David said to Uriah, "Remain here today also, and tomorrow I will send you back." So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day and the next, and David invited him. And he ate in his presence and drank, so that he made him drunk. And in the evening he went out to lie on his couch with the servants, but he did not go down to his house. So what's David trying to do here? Yeah, he's trying to get Uriah to go in and sleep with his wife, is what he's trying to do. That way, David already knows she's pregnant at this time, and he wants Uriah to go in, so it covers his sin. That way, the whole world won't find out about it. That's what David's trying to do right now. Uriah, he seems like a real stand-up guy. Like he does. He seems like a real good guy by all accounts. He's at war. He won't go in and he won't go into his own house while his men are out in battle. Like he wants to be back with his men. Does he want to go into his house? Probably, but he knows what the priority is and where he needs to keep his mind. Uriah is probably a good example of somebody we should look up to in Scripture that we don't hardly ever talk about, because David always gets the spotlight in these stories. But anyhow, David's trying to hide his sin, and it gets worse. Keeps getting worse. It's a good example of like you do one bad thing, like you got all these decision points in life. You can tell the truth, or you can keep digging your hole. A lot of us try to dig our hole. I've done it before. We've all probably been down that road in our life, but it doesn't ever seem to work out, and it don't for David here. Verse 14. In the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it by the hand of Uriah. In the letter, he wrote, set Uriah in the forefront of the hardest fighting, and then draw back from him that he may be struck down and die. And as Joab was besieging the city, he assigned Uriah to the place where he knew there were valiant men. And the men of the city came out and fought with Joab, and some of the servants of David among the people fell. Uriah the Hittite also died. Then Joab told David all the news about the fight. None of that worked, so David basically had him killed. That's what happened. Put him in a situation where he knew he would die. Alright, verse 19. And he instructed the messenger, when you have finished telling all the news about the fighting to the king, then if the king's anger arises, and if he says to you, why did you go so near the city to fight? Did you not know they would shoot from the wall? Who killed Abimelech, the son of Jerubbezek? Did not a woman cast an upper millstone on him from the wall, so that he died at Tebez? Why did you go so near the wall? Then you shall say, your servant Uriah the Hittite is also dead. Even these messengers going back and forth, just tell David about Uriah. He's not going to be mad if that mission was accomplished. So the messenger went and came and told David that all Joab had sent him to tell. The messenger said to David, the men gained advantage over us and came out against us in the field, but we drove them back to the entrance of the gate. Then the archers shot at your servants from the wall. Some of the king's servants are dead, and your servant Uriah the Hittite is also dead. David said to the messenger, thus you shall say to Joab, do not let this matter displease you, for the sword devours now one and now another. Strengthen your attack against the city and overthrow it, and encourage him. Now see, David doesn't even seem to care about all these other people dying at this point in time. He cares that Uriah is dead. But it seems to be where his head and where his heart's at the moment. When the wife of Uriah heard that Uriah, her husband, was dead, she lamented over her husband. And when the mourning was over, David sent and brought her to his house, and she became his wife and bore him a son. The thing that David done has displeased the Lord. Now, obviously, David would have already known this action was unacceptable, right? And this was going to displease God. But he got caught up, I'm sure. He got caught up in, he did one bad thing, tried to cover it, and kept digging his hole deeper, is what happened. So now you got this situation where this guy, David, the great David, the man after God's own heart, has done something bad. So God's in a situation now where he has to deal with it, where there's a decision point here. When I read the story, I'm surprised David's still alive. I'm surprised God didn't strike him down, to be honest with you, but he didn't. He took a different approach, and he sent Nathan. Is what he did. One of his prophets. And this is where you get the parable. Now, I read all that to tell you context is important with parables. It's important. And when we're talking about Jesus' parables, who is he talking to? What problem was he trying to solve or address? Right? All those things matter when we're trying to get the meaning behind a parable. But David messed up. He had literally took a man's wife. He watched her. He sent his men to go get her. He slept with her. To make matters worse, she became pregnant. David had the husband killed. Then he took her and married her on top of it all. Right? He did a lot of wrong there. David had got himself in a mess. And now here comes Nathan. So the Lord sent Nathan to David. When he came to him, he said, there were two men in a certain town, one rich and the other poor. The rich man had a very large number of sheep and cattle, but the poor man had nothing except one little ewe lamb he had bought. He raised it, it grew up with him and his children. It shared his food, drank from his cup, and even slept in his arms. It was like a daughter to him. Now a traveler came to the rich man, but the rich man refrained from taking one of his own sheep or cattle to prepare a meal for the traveler who had come to him. Instead, he took the ewe lamb that belonged to the poor man and prepared it for the one who had come. Then David's anger was greatly kindled against the man, and he said to Nathan, as the Lord lives, the man who has done this deserves to die. And he shall restore the lamb fourfold, because he did this thing. and because he had no pity. Right? So Nathan throws this thing out that triggers David to think about a sinful situation, right? David goes as far as to say this guy doesn't deserve to live anymore. As the Lord lives, the man who has done this deserves to die. This is what Nathan gets after his heart here a little bit with his parable. And then Nathan says to David, "You are the man." Right? You are the man. Thus says the Lord God of Israel, I anointed you king over Israel, and I delivered you out of the hand of Saul. I gave you your master's house and your master's wives into your arms. I gave you the house of Israel and Judah. And if this were too little, I would add to you as much more. Why have you despised the word of the Lord to do what is evil in his sight? You have struck down Uriah the Hittite with a sword, and you have taken his wife to be your wife, and you have killed him with the sword of the Ammonites. So it's some things to think about with it, right? Why? What are some advantages? Think about Nathan in the situation. What are some advantages Nathan gains out of using a parable to address this? Right? For one, he lowered David's defenses. Have you ever tried to have a conversation with somebody that's done something seriously wrong? I'm not gonna apply it to everybody, but generally speaking, when we do something wrong, when we do something bad, or we sin, what happens? Our defenses go up, right? And what do we try to do with that? We try to justify our sinful actions because we don't want to get caught. Everybody doesn't do that. Some people are really good about learning that throughout their life, and they can immediately just be like, truth needs to come out at this moment. Generally speaking, people put up their defenses, and David did the same thing. I'm not going to say it's a natural reaction, but generally speaking, people do that. So Nathan uses this parable, and it lowers his defenses, and it cuts right at David's heart, right? He makes David think about a sinful situation. He comes up with another story about a wrongdoing, one person sinning against another greatly, right? And then he even went as far to make David think about what the punishment was for that situation, right? David said, this guy deserves to die. That's the conclusion that David himself came to. Decreased his own risk of physical harm. So Nathan, remember who we're talking about? We're talking about David. David is a warrior. He is the conqueror of nations. That's the guy that we're talking about. Countries, people have said during this time nobody except God could stand against David. Like he was one of the greatest leaders of the time on the battlefield, right? So now Nathan is in a situation where I gotta go tell this guy about everything he did wrong. One way he could have did that was just, tell David we committed adultery, had the guy killed, and all that stuff. But David's already spiraling here. The situation could be very different. David could just take him out if he chose to. I don't think Nathan probably could not have stood against David. So Nathan is in a stressful situation here. And he uses parable form to de-escalate the situation and get David to think before he addresses the real sin that's going on. Once again, it's just some things to think about. There are advantages and disadvantages to everything, right? If I was David, I'd probably said, Nathan, quit beating around the bush. What do you want? Right? That probably would have been my natural reaction. But God sent him, and with a corrective action in mind, and that's what you see come out here. And it does work. Does David get back on track later on? Does he get back on track? He does. He does. He messed up. He had a rough time. He gets back on track later on.
Yeah, God disciplined.
God disciplined him.
Yeah.
He did.
What he did was kind of in private and secret. When God disciplined him, it was public.
It was. And I'm not gonna go on and read the rest of the you know, it's not a study on David, but what happened? What happened? You want to tell us?
Well, he says the sword will never leave your house.
Yep.
And it sure didn't. You had these predictions of judgment were fulfilled in the violation of Tamar.
His son slept with
The violent deaths of Amnon and Absalom, and Absalom's public appropriation of David's concubines. Took his wives.
Yeah. So the kid that came out of this, what happened to the kid? He died, right? What happened to all David's wives? Bad things, right? So God, he drops a hammer on David, like the earthly hammer. He doesn't end his life, but he definitely swiftly corrects this situation. But it started with Nathan's parable.
Uriah is my hero.
Uriah is.
Look, there ought to be studies. He should be in the New Testament. There should be parables.
That's a sermon point for Mark. Tell him to preach about it. Yeah. All right. So just y'all can see how parables are used though throughout the Bible. That's the point. They pop up. There's almost always a problem or issue that's being addressed, right? And it's not always like individual sin like David had done, but there's always, Jesus doesn't just throw them out there for you to think about for no reason. There's something that he's trying to get after with his parables. I just threw this verse up here because you need to understand that there was other people trying to teach and get their point of view out during the time of Jesus, but people recognized Jesus as somebody who was different, as one who taught with authority. That's one thing that people noticed about Jesus. Parables. It's one of those things when you're talking about the scribes and the Pharisees, right? Thinking about parables, they thought they were frivolous little stories, not worthy of a teacher of God. That was the mindset on it, right? But Jesus used it a lot. Jesus used it a lot because he wanted to relate to us. All right. I'm going to throw this up here for you, and then we'll talk about a few things when we're studying parables, and I'll let y'all know where we're going to go next week. So Matthew 13, and I just throw this up there because people ask Jesus why he teaches in parables, and Jesus tells them, right? Because if you were living in that time, and there was this guy walking around telling these stories all the time, or these accounts, and teaching in a different way, you would wonder, like, why are you doing this? Why are you teaching like this? Matthew 13, verse 10. The disciples came to him and said, "Why do you speak to them in parables?" And he answered, "To you it has been given to know the secrets of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given. For to the one who has more will be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. This is why I speak to them in parables, because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand." So Jesus gives us a two-part answer to that question. He does. He gives us two different things to consider. To those who will listen, that's kind of what he's addressing first, right? To you has been given to know the secrets of the kingdom of heaven. He's talking to disciples, people who will listen, who will follow, who will pay attention to him. Parables will open people's minds even more to those who are actually seeking the truth. That's the thing. If you're actually after Jesus and you take his teaching seriously and you pay attention to what he's saying, it'll open your eyes even more to the truth, which has previously been hidden. There were common people during this time who were hungry for a Messiah to come. There 100% was. And those people who were paying attention and picking up on what Jesus is putting down, they're gonna get it. They're gonna understand what Jesus is talking about. Second reason for speaking in parables, it may sound harsh, right? This is why I speak to them in parables, because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand. Like I was talking about, there were people, scribes, Pharisees, who didn't consider Jesus as a teacher, right? They didn't want him to be a teacher, and they considered parables as like little kid things, little childish things that ain't worthy of being like a teacher that you would see in the temple, for instance. People would have their hearts hardened about his teaching, right? If you didn't want Jesus, you weren't looking for him, right? And you weren't paying attention, you're not going to get it. You might hear it, but you're not really going to hear it, nor are you going to understand it. These things are directed a lot towards people who want a Messiah, who want Jesus, who are looking for Jesus, who are looking for all these prophecies to be fulfilled that were laid out throughout time. That's the answer that Jesus gives when he was asked, "Why do you teach in its way?" Right? So we want to be people who are looking for him.
One of the things that I picked up from that is that it's easier sometimes for us to see the sins of others than it is to see our own sins. And that, he took the poor man's lamb, and David saw that, and saw that as being sin, but he didn't relate that to his own problems. And that's so important, and that's probably one of the reasons he taught it that way.
That's exactly right. That's an excellent way to put it. I mean, you can.
Okay. Unless Jesus followed by explaining the parables, did the people really understand what he was saying? Because he would tell his 12, who's on the bodies, what it meant. They didn't even understand. So I'm confused about that. They understood the little story, I guess, didn't they? They understood the story.
So this right here is buried right in the middle of the parable of the sower. Is where that's buried at, right? And he throws this account out about everybody knows it. I'm sure we'll talk about it here in a few weeks. But his disciples didn't even get it. That's why they asked this question, right? They require you to think about and pray about. They do. They're not always something that's going to be like, boom, I understand the mystery of it. They're going to require deep thought.
And we're supposed to revisit them. We're supposed to not just read it once and that's it. It's supposed to be a growth thing. It's going to transform you each time you do kind of look at it.
Most of the time, when Jesus throws out a parable, it's in a situation that is not the best situation, and he is triggering the audience to think. Is what he's doing. Some people won't get it. Some people won't get it. I think Jesus, and I'll talk about it at the end too, but there's a lot of ways people learn. Right? Some people are head people. Some people are heart people. Some people want truth in prophecies. Some people want stories. I think Jesus is smart enough to know there are different methods that people are going to intake information to, and different things that are actually going to connect with you. Right? This will connect with. It's not going to connect with everybody, but it will connect with some. Hopefully that helps. Probably don't, though.
think also it was easier to pass it down to generation to generation and remember the parables. And I picture like a guy going out and like the seeds, I told him he's mad, he's angry, maybe he's mad at his wife or whatever, and he goes out and he's sitting on a rock and he looks and he sees his seeds are laying there on the hard dirt, and then it hits him about the parable.
Yeah.
Because that's, and he realizes his sin, those parables stay with you.
You can. If you have a visualization of something that you can retain it a lot.
And then after Christ died and all that happened, it all kind of came together, and I think they put it generation after generation, passed that down, and it all kind of melted, gelled at that point, maybe.
Yeah. Y'all have some good thoughts.
Everyone, including the Messiah was predicted to come. So everyone is seeking, okay, including the religious leaders and stuff at that time. But the difference is the disciples were willing to believe Jesus was the leader. These others, they didn't want to have anything. This is not the king that we wanted. This is not the person. So they refused. So the parables were just nothing to them except this don't make any sense. But because those who believed and were willing to accept Jesus as the Messiah, he took time with them to explain everything. This is given to you to know the truth. They're not going to know it. I'm going to speak this, move on. But you will be with me. I will explain things to you. I will teach you. And at the end, they understood. Where the others, they're left out because they refused.
Yeah, that's right. Like I said, you've got to be actively after Jesus, seeking after Jesus, seeking for the Messiah in a time, or you're not going to get it. You're not going to get it. Let's hit some points real quick, so we can get to what we're going to do next week. All right. So just some guiding principles for parables when we're studying. Context. Context is important. It is important. To whom was Jesus speaking to? What problem was he trying to solve? We need to look for that when we're talking about parables. Just like the account of David and Nathan, right? Nathan was obviously, it's clear, you can see it. What problem was Nathan trying to solve, right? That one's a little easier for us to think about. All right, next part. Kind of got to think about school stuff sometimes. Central theme, main point of the parable. What is it? Usually with a parable, there is one overriding message that comes from that parable, and you don't want to miss the main point. If you miss the main point, you're going to miss out on the truth of what Jesus is trying to do.
What's the moral of the story?
What's the moral of the story? There you go. Yeah, I like you two this morning because y'all are saying stuff, but y'all are putting better words with it than me, so appreciate it. All right, here's another one. Don't overanalyze. Don't overanalyze parables. We're masters at overanalyzing things sometimes. The Bible was never intended to be so difficult as we make it to be. The truth of a parable is rarely ever seen in its finer detail. Things like, here, I wrote a few things down. Why were there 10 lost coins? What does the Good Samaritan's donkey represent, right? We don't need to go down those roads with parables because you will do more harm than good to the teaching of the parable. We don't need to overanalyze things. Well, that's hard for us to do because we're in the business of overanalyzing things. I'll tell you right now, we are some experts at overanalyzing things.
So I think God's got these little hidden nuggets for us. Oh, I'm the dog.
Yeah. See? Don't. Yeah. All right. Here's the thing. Parables don't teach new. They don't necessarily teach new stuff. Jesus uses parables to teach stuff that's been around, stuff that God's already shown to people in a different way. He doesn't teach new doctrine in parables. And then the last one. Find yourself in a parable. Find yourself in a parable. Seriously. Put yourself in, try to put yourself in the situation. Who are you in the story? Are you the Levite? Are you the Samaritan woman? Who are you? No, you're not the donkey. Don't be the donkey. Don't be the donkey. Are you the shepherd? Are you the lost sheep? Are you the returning son? You might find yourself in all the characters of a parable, kind of depending on where you're at in your life. But try to put yourself in the parable, and really think about it, and think about. It's a good reflection time for us when we can do that. We've all been in areas of our lives where we seem to be on track with God, and other areas where we can struggle that make us feel like we're a character in these stories sometimes. But put yourself in the account. I want y'all to remember these things though when you're studying parables and we're going through. Why study parables? Because they aim for the heart. I think that's what Jesus is getting at, and why he throws them out so much in his teaching. I briefly touched on this. One more slide and I'll be done. I briefly touched on this 2 weeks ago before we went out with COVID, but parables are the thrown alongside of. It's an earthly account of a heavenly truth, a comparison of something in the world to make a point about something in heaven or something eternal. We live in a good time for that right now. We do. And I mentioned it before, but when you turn on the news or get on the internet, right, people will believe anything except the truth sometimes, right? But people can get behind a well-told story or well-told account of something. Learn from Jesus' teachings in this, and maybe it'll give us some small things that we can use in our own personal life, in our own personal teaching with others. One teacher puts it this way: says the truth aims for the head, a story aims for the heart. Right? And you need to hit people right here. You need to hit people right here. Jesus was wise enough to know that some of us are head people, some of us are heart people. Some people require both to respond in the appropriate way. Jesus seemed to try to teach by every method available at his disposal, and this was one of his ways to teach. All right, where are we going next week? So we're going to look right here. Luke 15, 1 through 32. So y'all, please read that. Put little notes here at the corners of the board on little nuggets of things to do or not do. But as we enter this new period of study and we're talking about Jesus' parables, I really want y'all to read through this. Like, read it each day. Think about the parable. Read and pray about it. Take what Jesus teaches and pray about it. Ask him to give you a fresh understanding and a new desire to learn. If you do that, you'll get a lot out of the study of parables. But that's what we're going to do next week. So if y'all know anybody that wasn't here, like Miss Evelyn, for instance, she always wants to do her homework. Let her know what we're doing. She may be watching, but we'll see. All right, that's it for today, and then we'll start digging in the Luke next week. All right, thank y'all.